Please don't leave. The little black girl cried to the biker as a locked interview room door closed suddenly. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. It was a typical day at the office. The kind of day where nothing extraordinary happens and everything seems mundane. That was until the door to the interview room suddenly slammed shut, locking from the outside. Inside, a small, black girl was sitting on the edge of a chair, tears streaming down her face. Her name was Maya, and she was just 13 years old, a child caught in the middle of a terrifying situation that no child should ever have to endure. Her hands trembled as she wiped her tears, glancing nervously at the closed door. "Please don't leave," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The words were desperate, pleading, as if she were asking for help, though she didn't know where to turn. The room smelled of stale air, and the dim lighting made it feel even smaller than it already was. The clock on the wall ticked slowly, its rhythm echoing in the silence. Maya sat there, alone, locked away in this tiny, sterile room, with no one to turn to. Or so she thought. Outside the room, Jack, a member of the local biker gang known as the Thunderwolves, was walking down the hallway. He wasn't supposed to be here. He wasn't supposed to be involved in this case. But somehow, fate had brought him to this exact moment. He had received a call earlier that day, a call that changed everything. A call about Maya. Her name hit him like a punch to the gut. He had promised her father, his best friend, that he would always look out for her. That promise had been made 5 years ago, just before her father had tragically passed away. Jack had never broken a promise in his life, especially not one made to a friend who had saved his life in Afghanistan. The call came from a social worker named Elena Vargas, who worked at the hospital where Maya was being held. She explained that Maya was in danger, that her stepfather, a man with a dark secret, was trying to take her back. Maya was terrified. Jack didn't hesitate. He had already made up his mind. He would be there for her, no matter the cost. As Jack walked toward the interview room, he could hear Maya's muffled cries through the door. His heart clenched, knowing what she was going through. He couldn't imagine the fear she must have been feeling. Jack paused for a moment, took a deep breath, and then opened the door. The sight that greeted him was heartbreaking. Maya, sitting there, her eyes wide with fear, her body trembling, and her voice barely audible, spoke the words that would forever change the course of this story. "Please don't leave," she begged. Jack's heart broke for her. He knelt down beside her, his leather jacket creaking as he did so. "I'm not going anywhere, kid," he said softly. "You're safe now." But Jack knew that the real battle was just beginning. Maya wasn't out of danger yet. Not by a long shot. As he looked into her eyes, he saw something that made him even more determined. The will to fight for her, the promise he had made to her father, and the knowledge that no one, not even her stepfather, would be able to take her away from him again. The sound of the door clicking shut echoed through the sterile room, sealing off the world outside. Maya could still feel the remnants of fear crawling beneath her skin, but she knew something had changed the moment Jack walked in. The tense atmosphere seemed to meld away as he knelt beside her, his presence a reassuring shield. She felt safe. For the first time in days, the terror gripping her heart began to loosen, just a little. "I'm not going anywhere, kid," Jack said, his voice calm but firm. "You're safe now." Maya's wide eyes locked onto his, searching for any sign of doubt, but all she saw was the unwavering promise of protection. She nodded, her sobs dying down, and wiped her tear-streaked face with the back of her hand. She had heard of bikers. She had heard of their strength, their loyalty, their ability to make things right. But in this moment, it was Jack's words that gave her hope. He wasn't like the others. He wasn't the kind of man who would run when things got tough. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for not leaving." Jack gave a small nod, standing up and looking toward the door. The battle wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. He knew this was only the beginning. He had promised her father he would protect her, and that promise was not one he would break. He couldn't. But Maya's safety wasn't the only thing weighing on his mind. The stepfather, that man, that cop, was a different kind of threat. Jack didn't know all the details yet, but he could sense it. There was something off about him. Something dangerous. Something that needed to be dealt with. As he walked over to the door, Jack turned back to Maya. Stay here. We'll figure this out. His voice was firm, but there was a tenderness there too. He wasn't just here to rescue her. He was here to make sure nothing could ever hurt her again. The door creaked open, and Jack stepped into the hallway, his boots echoing off the cold, tiled floor. The hallway was eerily quiet, too quiet for his liking. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He could feel the clock ticking, every second pulling him closer to whatever dangerous game was about to unfold. The stepfather had been in the building. Jack knew that. He had to move quickly. Every minute they wasted was another minute the man had to make his move. But this wasn't just about speed. It was about strategy. He had learned long ago that when you rush into a situation without thinking, you make mistakes. And Jack didn't plan on making any mistakes today. He glanced at his phone, tapping out a quick message to his crew. The Thunderwolves had responded quickly, but Jack knew he needed them now more than ever. He needed them to be ready for anything. They couldn't afford to let their guard down. A response pinged back almost immediately. We're ready, boss. That was all Jack needed. He smiled to himself, the weight on his chest lifting just a little. His brothers had his back. They always did. He turned and walked. Toward the elevators, every step measured, every decision calculated. But just as he reached the elevator, a voice stopped him in his tracks. It was Elena, the social worker who had called him. Jack, we need to talk. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with worry. It's about Maya's stepfather. Jack turned, his expression hardening. What about him? Elena hesitated for a moment, then spoke quickly, her voice tinged with fear. He's not who he says he is. Maya's mom died in a car accident months ago, and he's been hiding something about it. Something that makes everything worse. Jack's stomach twisted. He could feel the weight of the situation shifting, becoming more complicated, more dangerous. Tell me everything. Elena's voice dropped lower, as if she didn't want to be overheard. Maya's stepfather, his name is Patrick Donovan, was the one who brought her to the hospital. He said she fell down the stairs, but I don't buy it. Her injuries don't match that story. Jack's blood ran cold. A decorated cop, a community pillar, someone who was supposed to protect and serve, and yet he was hiding something so dark. Something that made Jack's instincts flare with warning. This is bad, Jack muttered under his breath. This is so much worse than I thought. He turned back to Elena, his mind racing. We need to keep Maya safe. Right now, we need to get her out of here. Elena nodded. I'll do everything I can, but we need to be careful. He's well connected, and he's already trying to pull strings. Jack clenched his fists, his anger rising. The thought of a man like that, abusing his power and using his badge to hurt a child, was enough to make his blood boil. He couldn't let it stand. He wouldn't let it stand. Let's move, Jack said, his voice low and determined. We'll keep her safe, no matter what it takes. And with that, he turned and made his way back to the interview room, ready to face whatever was coming next. The tension in the air was thick as Jack walked back to the interview room, his mind racing with the new information Elena had shared. Patrick Donovan, Maya's stepfather, wasn't just a decorated cop. He was something darker, something far more dangerous. Jack's fists clenched at his sides. There was no way he was going to let someone like that get away with what he'd done, not when it involved a child he had promised to protect. As he approached the door, he could hear Maya's faint sobs on the other side. His heart broke for her, but he had to stay focused. This wasn't just about rescuing her anymore. This was about justice, and making sure no one else would ever be hurt by Donovan again. Jack opened the door and stepped inside. Maya was sitting on the edge of her chair, her face tear-streaked, but her eyes more focused now, as if she had begun to understand that help was on the way. Maya, Jack said, his voice steady. We're going to get you out of here, but we need to move quickly. You stay close to me, okay? She nodded, though Jack could see the uncertainty in her eyes. It wasn't just the fear of the situation. It was the kind of fear that only someone who had been through unimaginable trauma could understand. Maya had been through too much in her young life. Jack could see that now. She was far stronger than anyone gave her credit for, but that didn't mean she should have to carry this weight alone. He turned to Elena, who had followed him into the room, her expression grave. Do you know where Donovan is now? Jack asked. Elena shook her head. He was just here a moment ago. He's in the hospital somewhere, but I don't know where. He's a cop, Jack. He has the resources to make this difficult for all of us. Jack's mind began working faster, formulating a plan. He knew the risks, but he also knew that with the right moves, they could turn the tables. We'll get the law involved, but not yet, Jack said, his voice calm but firm. We can't let him take Maya back. Not without a fight. Elena's eyes widened slightly, but she nodded in agreement. You're right. We can't let him win. Jack gave a quick nod and turned back to Maya. Listen to me, he said gently. We're going to leave here, but we need to be careful. Your stepfather has a lot of influence. We can't take any chances. Maya wiped her face with the back of her hand, her voice barely above a whisper. He said he'd come for me. He said he always comes back. Jack's heart tightened. Not this time, he said firmly. This time, you have people who will protect you, no matter what. He could see Maya's shoulders sag in relief, the weight of her fear lifting just a little. Jack took a step toward the door, pausing to look at Elena one last time. We're going to need your help. Can you get us out of here without him noticing? Elena didn't hesitate. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll make sure no one knows you're leaving. With that, the plan was set in motion. Jack motioned for Maya to follow him, and the three of them walked out of the room quietly, with Elena leading the way. Every step felt like an eternity, the hallway stretching out before them. Jack kept his focus ahead, making sure Maya stayed close by his side. He could feel the adrenaline starting to kick in, the familiar rush of danger spurring him forward. He knew they had to act fast. The hospital wasn't a safe place for Maya. Donovan could be anywhere, and he wouldn't stop until he had her back. But Jack wasn't going to let that happen. Not while he had breath in his body. As they reached the back exit, Elena paused, checking over her shoulder before unlocking the door. It's all clear, she whispered. Jack motioned for Maya to go first, then stepped outside, his eyes scanning the parking lot for any sign of danger. The sun was starting to set, the sky painted with hues of orange and purple. The cool air felt like a stark contrast to the suffocating heat of the hospital. They were out. For now, they were free. But Jack knew this was just the beginning. As he looked at Maya, he saw the fear in her eyes, but he also saw something else, a spark of hope. It wasn't much, but it was enough. He wasn't going to let anyone take that hope away from her. Stay close, Maya, Jack said, his voice low but determined. We're going to make sure he never hurts you again. Maya looked up at him, her voice steady for the first time in what felt like forever. I believe you, she whispered. Jack smiled, his heart swelling with pride. She was going to be okay. He was going to make sure of it. But there was one thing he knew for certain, the fight wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The next few hours would be critical. As the trio moved quickly through the back alley, Jack could feel the weight of the situation settle in once more. They had to make it to safety, and they had to do it before Donovan could catch up. Jack's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, seeing a text from one of his brothers in the Thunderwolves. We're ready when you are. Jack's heart skipped a beat. The cavalry was on its way. The war had just begun. The night air was crisp and cold as Jack led Maya and Elena through the back alley of the hospital, the heavy sound of their footsteps echoing against the walls. Jack's mind raced as he kept a sharp eye on their surroundings. But something about this night felt different. The weight of the promise he made to Maya's father hung heavily on him. He wasn't just protecting a child. He was protecting a future, a life that had already been scarred by so much. As they reached the corner, Elena stopped, glancing both ways before signaling them to move. We're almost there, she whispered, her eyes flickering with uncertainty. But we need to hurry. Jack nodded, glancing back at Maya, whose face still held that flicker of fear mixed with the budding hope Jack had instilled in her. Her hand clutched his sleeve, and Jack could feel the anxiety radiating from her. You're doing great, Maya, he reassured her softly. She nodded but didn't speak. Her silence spoke volumes, and Jack knew she was processing everything, the fear, the relief, the uncertainty. They had only one goal now, get her out of here before her stepfather, Patrick Donovan, figured out what was happening. Jack had already made a mental checklist of what had to be done, but the closer they got to safety, the more the pressure mounted. They couldn't let their guard down. Jack's phone buzzed in his pocket, the familiar sound cutting through the tension. He pulled it out and saw a text from one of his brothers in the Thunderwolves. We've got eyes on Donovan. We're moving in. Jack exhaled a deep breath of relief. The cavalry was on its way. But this wasn't just about getting Maya away from the hospital. It was about facing Donovan, confronting the truth, and making sure he never hurt Maya or anyone else again. The thought of Donovan sent a surge of anger through Jack. A man who wore a badge, a man who should have been a protector, but instead, he was an abuser hiding behind his position of power. Jack knew what kind of man he was dealing with, and he wasn't going to back down. "We've got this," Jack muttered under his breath, more to himself than anyone else. They reached the alley's end, and Jack motioned for them to pause. His senses were on high alert. "Wait here," he said, turning to Elena. "Keep an eye on Maya. I'm going to check the coast." Elena nodded, but Jack could see the worry in her eyes. She had been a part of this fight for Maya's safety from the beginning, and she had been invaluable. But this was his battle now. He had promised Maya's father, and he wasn't about to let that promise be broken. He moved quickly but carefully, his footsteps light on the pavement. The streets were empty at this hour, the only sounds the distant hum of traffic and the occasional rustle of leaves. Jack reached the corner and peered around it. A few blocks down, he saw the headlights of a car. It wasn't Donovan's car, but it was too close for comfort. He needed to get Maya out of here and into the safe house before anything went wrong. Jack's phone buzzed again, and this time it was a call. "Talk to me," Jack answered, his voice sharp. "Donovan's moving," came the voice of his brother, Phantom. "He's in the car, but we've got his location. We'll have him surrounded in 10 minutes. Jack's grip tightened on his phone. "Good. Keep me updated. I'm on my way." He turned back to Maya and Elena. "We need to move. Fast." They started walking quickly again, their pace quickening as they approached the alley's end. Jack's mind raced. He could already hear the sound of motorcycles in the distance. The thunder wolves were closing in. He had to be sure that Maya would be safe, and that Donovan wouldn't be able to touch her again. "We'll make it, Maya," Jack said, his voice low but full of conviction. "We're almost there." But even as he said those words, Jack knew that the Real challenge was still ahead. They weren't just running from Donovan. They were heading straight into the heart of danger. The next few minutes would determine everything. The streetlights flickered overhead, casting long shadows across the pavement as Jack led them towards safety. The darkness seemed to stretch out before them, but Jack wasn't afraid. He had been in darker places before, faced with worse odds, but there was something about this fight that made it personal. Maya deserved a life free from fear, free from the shadows that her stepfather had cast over her. And Jack was going to make sure she got it. As they rounded the corner and approached the waiting vehicle, Jack felt a weight lift from his shoulders. They were almost out of the woods. But just as they reached the car, a sound broke the silence, a screech of tires on the asphalt. Jack's heart skipped a beat. Donovan. He had found them. Jack's instincts kicked in. He grabbed Maya's hand, pulling her toward the car. "Get in," he barked at Elena. But before they could reach the door, a flash of headlights blinded them, and a black SUV barreled down the street toward them, cutting off their escape. Jack's heart raced. He had no choice now. The final confrontation had arrived. With a deep breath, Jack turned to face the oncoming threat. His brothers were close, but it was up to him now. He would protect Maya, no matter what it took. The black SUV screeched to a halt, its tires skidding on the wet pavement as it blocked their path. Jack's heart pounded in his chest as he grabbed Maya's hand, pulling her behind him. His body instinctively positioned itself between her and the danger that was rapidly closing in. The headlights of the SUV blazed down on them, casting long shadows across the street. Jack could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This was it. They were no longer running. They were about to face the monster that had been hunting Maya. The driver's side door of the SUV swung open, and a figure stepped out, tall and broad-shouldered, his movements deliberate. Jack's blood ran cold when he recognized the man. It was Patrick Donovan, Maya's stepfather, a decorated cop with years of service, now using his badge as a shield to hide his darkest secrets. Donovan's cold eyes scanned the scene, locking onto Jack with a look that sent a chill down his spine. "You think you can just walk away with her?" Donovan's voice was low, threatening. "She's mine." Jack's grip tightened on Maya's hand as he stepped forward. His voice was steady, but the fury behind it was undeniable. "Not anymore. You don't own her." Donovan's eyes flickered with a brief flash of surprise, but then the smirk returned to his lips. "You're making a big mistake, Harland," Donovan said, his tone dripping with contempt. "You really think you can protect her from me? I'm the law. I always win." Jack didn't flinch. He had heard it all before. Men like Donovan always thought they could get away with anything. But Jack wasn't the man he once was. He wasn't afraid anymore. He had made a promise to a dying friend, and he intended to keep it. The only thing you're winning, Donovan, is a one-way ticket to the truth, Jack said. His words were cutting, filled with the weight of everything that had happened. You're not walking away from this. Not this time. Donovan took a step toward Jack, his fists clenched. You don't know what you're dealing with, he growled, his voice dangerously low. I have more power than you could ever imagine. You're nothing but a biker. Jack's eyes didn't leave Donovan's. I'm someone who keeps his promises, he said, his voice hard. And I'm about to make sure you never hurt her again. The tension between them was palpable, the air charged with the kind of anger that could break people. Jack could see Donovan's jaw tighten, the man's mask slipping just a little. But Jack didn't give him a chance to respond. He wasn't going to wait for the confrontation to escalate any further. He could already hear the sound of motorcycles in the distance. His brothers were closing in. Maya, stay close, Jack said, turning to her. She looked up at him, her wide eyes filled with both fear and hope. We're getting out of here, Jack promised, his voice calm. You're safe now. As he said those words, a roar of engines erupted from behind them. The Thunderwolves had arrived. In an instant, the sound of over 20 motorcycles filled the air, the powerful engines reverberating through the street. Jack felt the familiar rush of adrenaline as the bikers pulled into the parking lot, their bikes lining up like a wall of steel and leather. Jack didn't need to turn around to know they had his back. He could feel the weight of their loyalty, the promise they had made to stand by him, no matter what. Donovan's expression shifted from smug confidence to something darker, something more dangerous. He knew, deep down, that his time was running out. He wasn't going to win this. Not against the Thunderwolves. Not against the power of family and loyalty. You think you can just walk in here and take her from me? Donovan hissed, his voice dripping with venom. I'll have you all arrested. You'll regret this. Jack didn't flinch. He stood his ground, his eyes locked onto Donovan's with unyielding resolve. No one is taking her anywhere, Jack said firmly. You're done. It's over. The other bikers began to dismount, surrounding the scene, their presence undeniable. They were ready for whatever came next, and Jack knew they wouldn't back down. Donovan may have had a badge, but the Thunderwolves had something far more powerful: loyalty, strength, and the unwavering will to protect those who needed it. As Jack turned back to Maya, he could see the fear beginning to leave her eyes. She was starting to believe, truly believe, that she was safe. He took a deep breath, steadying himself for what was about to happen. He knew this was just the beginning, but it was a beginning they could win. It's over, Donovan, Jack said, his voice unwavering. You're not in control anymore. Donovan stepped back, his eyes narrowing in anger. We'll see about that, he muttered, but Jack could hear the hesitation in his voice. The Thunderwolves were closing in, and Donovan knew he had no way out. Jack's phone buzzed in his pocket again. He pulled it out, glancing at the message. We've got him surrounded. Just give the word. Jack's heart pounded as he looked at Maya, then back at Donovan. It's time. The Thunderwolves were ready. And so was Jack. Donovan's reign of terror was about to end. The standoff between Jack and Patrick Donovan intensified as the powerful rumble of motorcycle engines surrounded them. The Thunderwolves had arrived in full force, and the once dominant air that Donovan had tried to project was now fractured, the walls closing in on him. He took a hesitant step back, but his pride wouldn't let him back down completely. You think this changes anything? Donovan snarled, trying to regain his composure. You're all making a huge mistake. I'll have you all locked up by morning. Jack met his gaze head-on, his eyes unflinching. No, Donovan, he replied, his voice low but firm. This ends tonight, and you're not getting away with it. Donovan glanced toward the parked motorcycles, trying to calculate his next move. Jack could see the wheels turning in his head, the realization that his power, his badge, his status, meant nothing here. He wasn't the one in control anymore. Jack's brothers, the Thunderwolves, dismounted one by one, surrounding Donovan like a wall of iron and leather. Each of them was a reminder that Jack was not alone. They were a family, and they weren't about to let someone like Donovan hurt anyone else. You want to play games with people's lives, Patrick? One of Jack's brothers, Storm, called out from behind him. You'll find it's a game you can't win. Donovan's face twisted with anger as he looked around at the bikers, realizing they weren't backing down. His voice was louder now, filled with desperation. "You don't understand," he spat. "You don't know what I've had to do to survive. To protect my family." Jack stepped forward, his gaze never leaving Donovan's. "Protect your family?" he said, incredulity lacing his voice. "You're not protecting anyone. You're destroying everything you claim to love." Donovan's hand twitched, as if reaching for something, but he stopped himself. Jack could see it now, the cracks in the man's facade. The anger was no longer just a defense. It was fear, a fear of losing everything. The truth had caught up with him. Jack took another step closer. "You used your badge to hurt people, to control them. But not anymore. You're not going to hurt anyone else. Not while we're here." For a moment, Donovan's steely confidence seemed to falter. Jack could see the briefest flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, but then Donovan straightened up, squaring his shoulders. He was still trying to hold on to the last shred of power he had left. "I'm not going down without a fight," he growled. "And neither are you." Before Jack could respond, a sharp voice interrupted. "What's the hold-up here?" Elena, who had been silently observing, stepped forward from the shadows, her expression hardening as she locked eyes with Donovan. She had been part of this from the start, and now it was time for her to take a stand. "You're not in control anymore, Donovan," she said coldly, her voice unwavering. "Your time is up." Donovan looked at her, surprised by her defiance. "You're going to side with these criminals?" he sneered. "You don't know what you're dealing with." Elena's face remained calm. "I know exactly what I'm dealing with. You're a coward hiding behind a badge. And tonight, you'll answer for your actions." Jack nodded at Elena, appreciating the strength she was showing. They had come a long way to get here. It was time to end this. "Maya's going to be safe," Jack said, turning back to Donovan. "And you're going to face the consequences of what you've done." Donovan opened his mouth to retort, but he was interrupted by the sudden sound of sirens in the distance. Jack's heart skipped a beat. The cops were on their way, but not for them. For Donovan. The Thunderwolves had already made sure that the right people were notified, and now it was only a matter of time before the law caught up with him. Donovan's eyes widened as he heard the sirens growing closer. Panic started to creep into his expression, and for the first time that night, he seemed genuinely afraid. "You're not going to get away with this," Jack said, his voice calm but firm. "You can run, but there's nowhere left to hide." Donovan clenched his fists, taking one last desperate look around as the sirens grew louder. He knew his time was up. "This isn't over," he hissed, his voice low and full of venom. "I'll make sure you all regret this." But as he turned to flee, the bikers closed in, blocking his escape. He had nowhere left to run. A voice from behind him, sharp and commanding, called out, "It's over, Donovan. You've been caught." Jack stepped forward, watching as the police cruisers pulled up to the curb. Officers poured out, their eyes scanning the scene, quickly assessing the situation. But they knew exactly who was the one to arrest. As Donovan was handcuffed and led away by the officers, Jack looked over at Maya, who was standing a few feet away. Her face was a mixture of relief and disbelief. The nightmare was finally over for her. She was free. Jack walked over to her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's over now," he said softly. "You're safe." Maya looked up at him, a small smile creeping across her face. "Thank you," she whispered. Jack smiled back. "No need to thank me. It's what family does." The Thunderwolves gathered around them, their presence a reminder that they were more than just a club. They were a family, and they had kept their promise to protect Maya, no matter the cost. Jack looked around at his brothers, then back at Maya. "You're not alone anymore," he said. "And we'll make sure you never are again." The sound of the police cars fading into the distance marked the end of one chapter, but Jack knew it wasn't the end of the journey. Maya had a long road ahead of her, but now she had a family that would stand by her, protect her, and never let her face the world alone again. The sirens faded into the distance, leaving behind an eerie silence that filled the air like a heavy fog. Jack stood there for a moment, his gaze fixed on the police car as it drove away, taking Patrick Donovan with it. The man who had terrorized Maya for so long, the man who had been hiding behind his badge and his lies, was finally facing justice. Jack could feel the weight of the moment lifting off his shoulders, but he knew that the fight wasn't over yet. This was just one battle in a much larger war. He turned to Maya, who was standing quietly beside him. Her eyes were wide, still processing everything that had happened. The fear was gone now, replaced with a flicker of hope. Jack knew it wasn't going to be easy, but he also knew that she was stronger than she gave herself credit for. "It's over," Jack said softly, crouching down so he could look her in the eyes. "You're free." Maya looked up at him, her voice barely a whisper. "But what happens now? What do I do?" Jack's heart clenched at her words. He had seen the fear in her eyes when she first walked into the hospital, and he knew that fear wasn't just about Donovan. It was about everything she had been through, everything she had lost. "You take it one step at a time," Jack replied, his voice steady and full of reassurance. "You don't have to do it alone. We'll help you through it." The sound of footsteps interrupted their conversation, and Jack looked up to see his brothers from the Thunder Wolves walking toward him. Their faces were a mixture of relief and determination. The battle may have been won, but the war was far from over. "Is she okay?" Storm asked, his voice gruff but full of concern. Jack nodded. "She will be." "Good," Storm replied. "Because we've got your back, man." "We all do." Jack smiled at his brothers, the weight of their support lifting his spirits. They were more than just a club. They were a family, and family always came first. "Thanks, Storm," Jack said, his voice thick with gratitude. "This isn't over yet, but we'll handle it together." As the bikers gathered around, Jack turned his attention back to Maya, who was still standing quietly by his side. He could see the uncertainty in her eyes, the lingering questions she had about the future. "You know," Jack said, "you don't have to go back to where you were before. You're not alone anymore. You've got us now." Maya's eyes filled with tears, and she nodded, though the emotions were clearly overwhelming. "Thank you," she whispered. Jack gave her a reassuring smile. "You're welcome. You're safe now, and that's all that matters." The night was still young, but the threat was gone. The police would handle the legal side of things, but for now, Maya could rest. Jack knew they couldn't change the past, but they could give her a future, one where she wasn't running from the darkness. "Let's get out of here," Jack said, standing up. "We've got a lot of work ahead of us." The group of bikers moved with purpose as they made their way toward the motorcycles. Jack could feel the sense of camaraderie in the air, the unspoken bond between him and his brothers. They were family, and they would always protect each other. Maya climbed onto one of the bikes with Jack, and as they pulled out of the parking lot, she looked up at him, her face filled with gratitude. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "To a safe place," Jack said, his voice calm and steady. "A place where you can heal." The roar of the motorcycle engines filled the night air as they sped down the road, the wind whipping past them. Jack kept his eyes on the road ahead, but his thoughts were with Maya. This was only the beginning of her journey, but with the Thunder Wolves by her side, she wasn't facing it alone. They were a family, and nothing could break the bond they shared. As the lights of the city faded behind them, Jack felt a sense of peace wash over him. They had done it. They had protected Maya, and he knew, deep down, that he would keep his promise to her father. She would never be alone again. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but Jack was ready for whatever came next. They had fought for this, and they would fight for her. Together, the motorcycle roared down the darkened highway, the sound of the engines cutting through the silence of the night. Jack kept his eyes focused on the road ahead, but his mind was still processing everything that had happened. The weight of what they had done was starting to settle in. They had rescued Maya, taken down Donovan, and ensured that she was safe. But that didn't mean the fight was over. Jack knew better than anyone that evil like Donovan's didn't just disappear. It lingered. It came back. The moonlight reflected off the pavement as they continued their journey toward the safe house. Maya was riding behind him, her small hands gripping his waist, her body pressing against his as they sped through the night. Jack could feel the tension in her body, the anxiety that still lingered. He knew it wasn't going to be easy for her. She had been through too much pain, too much fear, but she was strong, and Jack wasn't going to let anything or anyone take that away from her. "You're doing great, Maya," Jack called back over his shoulder, his voice full of reassurance. "We're almost there." Maya didn't answer at first, but Jack could feel her nodding against his back. After a few moments, she spoke softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Is it really over?" Jack's heart ached as he heard the uncertainty in her voice. It was a question he had been asking himself ever since they left the hospital. He wanted to tell her that everything was fine now, that the nightmare was finally over. But deep down, he knew it wasn't that simple. No, Jack said honestly, his voice steady. It's not over. But you're safe now, and that's what matters. He could feel Maya tighten her grip on him. But this time, it was different. It wasn't fear, it was a kind of resolve. She was holding on, not just to him, but to the future that he promised she could have. They rode in silence for a while longer, the wind whipping through their hair, the sound of the engines humming in the background. Jack kept his focus on the road, but his thoughts kept drifting to Maya. She had been through more than any child should have to endure, and yet she was still standing. She was stronger than she realized. Jack had been around long enough to know that trauma like hers didn't just go away. It left scars, invisible ones that ran deep. But as long as he was there, as long as the Thunderwolves were there, she wouldn't have to face it alone. They reached the safe house just as the first light of dawn began to break over the horizon. Jack slowed the bike as they approached the small cabin tucked away in the woods, its simple exterior standing as a stark contrast to the chaos they had just left behind. The safe house was a place where no one could find them, a place where they could regroup and start fresh. Jack pulled into the driveway and cut the engine. The sound of the bike's roar died away, replaced by the quiet of the morning. Maya slid off the bike first, her legs unsteady as she stood on the ground. Jack helped her steady herself, his hand on her shoulder. "We're here," he said softly, giving her a reassuring smile. Maya looked around, her eyes taking in the quiet surroundings. For the first time in what felt like forever, she let out a breath of relief. She was safe. Jack led her toward the front door of the cabin, and as they stepped inside, the warmth of the fire in the hearth greeted them. The place was small but cozy, with comfortable furniture and simple decor. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Maya's eyes scanned the room, and Jack could see the slightest glimmer of peace in her expression. "This is your safe place now," Jack said gently. "You can stay here as long as you need to. No one will hurt you again." Maya nodded, her lips trembling as she fought to hold back tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Jack crouched down to her level, his hands on her shoulders. "You don't have to thank me," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "I made a promise to your dad, and I'm going to keep it." Maya looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. "Do you think I'll ever feel better? Do you think the fear will go away?" Jack smiled softly. "It might take time, but yes, I believe you will. And you don't have to do it alone. We're here for you, Maya. You have a family now." Maya's eyes filled with tears again, but this time, they were different. They were tears of hope, tears of someone who had finally found a place to belong. Jack stood up and looked around the cabin, taking in the peaceful surroundings. For the first time in a long time, he felt the weight of the world lifting off his shoulders. They had done it. They had brought Maya to safety, but there was still work to be done. He couldn't let his guard down. Not yet. Jack knew that Donovan's influence still lingered, and that there were more people out there like him. But for now, they had time. Time to heal, to rebuild, and to find peace. Jack walked over to the window, looking out at the trees as the sun slowly began to rise. It was a new day, a new chapter, and he was ready to fight for it. For Maya, for his brothers, and for the family they had built together. As the sun broke over the horizon, Jack knew one thing for sure. They had survived the darkness. And together, they would step into the light. The sun had barely risen when Jack stood by the window, his eyes watching the early light spill over the trees, casting long shadows across the quiet yard. The cabin was still, the only sound being the occasional crackle from the fire in the hearth. The peacefulness of the morning was a stark contrast to the chaos they had left behind. For the first time in a long while, Jack felt a weight lifting off his shoulders. Maya was safe, but there was still so much to do. He knew that the fight wasn't over, but for now, they had a moment to breathe. He turned away from the window and looked at Maya, who was sitting quietly by the fire, her eyes distant as she stared into the flames. The last few days had been a whirlwind of emotions for her: fear, confusion, hope, and Jack could see that she was still processing everything. But there was something different about her now. The terror that had once consumed her was beginning to fade, replaced by a quiet strength that Jack knew would carry her through the road ahead. "How are you feeling?" Jack asked, his voice soft but steady. Maya looked up at him, her eyes meeting his. There was a flicker of uncertainty there, but also something else: determination. "I don't know," she replied honestly. It's just all so much. I thought I'd never get out of there. I thought he was going to do worse. Jack's heart tightened at her words, and he walked over to sit beside her. You're safe now, he said, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. And you're never going back to that life. Maya nodded, her gaze dropping to her hands in her lap. I don't want to go back, she whispered. But sometimes I wonder if I'll ever really be okay. Jack paused, considering her words carefully. He had seen people survive far worse than what Maya had been through, but healing wasn't a quick process. It took time, and even then, the scars could remain. It's going to take time, he said quietly. But you're strong, Maya. Stronger than you know. And you're not alone in this. You've got a family now. The Thunder Wolves and me. We're here for you, no matter what. Maya looked up at him again, her eyes searching his face. But what happens now? How do I even begin to move on from all of this? Jack's expression softened as he thought about her question. He knew there were no easy answers, no quick fixes. You take it one step at a time, he said gently. You take the time you need to heal, and when you're ready, we'll face whatever comes next together. Maya bit her lip, as though trying to push down the emotions threatening to rise to the surface. I don't even know where to start. Jack gave her a reassuring smile. You start by letting yourself heal. You don't have to have all the answers right now. Just take it one day at a time. The quiet comfort of the safe house felt like a distant haven compared to the chaos of the world outside. Jack could see that Maya was beginning to settle into it, but the lingering fear in her eyes wasn't gone. It would take time, but she would find her way. What about you, Jack? Maya asked, her voice suddenly small. Are you okay? Jack was caught off guard by the question. He had been so focused on making sure Maya was safe that he hadn't thought much about his own feelings. He didn't know if he would ever be okay. The weight of promises made to fallen friends, the years of living on the edge, of being a part of a world that demanded constant vigilance, it had all taken a toll on him. I'm fine, Jack said, offering her a reassuring smile. I'm here for you. That's all that matters right now. Maya nodded, but Jack could see that she wasn't convinced. There was so much more that needed to be said, but now wasn't the time. He stood up and walked over to the door, his mind already turning to the next steps. He had promised Maya's father that he would protect her, and that promise was one he intended to keep. The Thunderwolves were ready to stand by him, but the road ahead was still uncertain. Donovan was behind bars, but Jack knew that his influence didn't just vanish overnight. There were others out there, people who would do anything to stop Maya from having a chance at a normal life. Jack had no intention of letting that happen. I'll be back soon, he said, turning to Maya. Just stay here, keep safe. I need to make sure the coast is clear, and we've got to get things in order. Maya nodded, and for the first time, Jack saw a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Thank you, she whispered, her voice quiet but filled with gratitude. Jack gave her a warm smile before stepping out of the cabin and into the fresh morning air. The world was still a dangerous place, but he knew that with the Thunderwolves by his side, he could face whatever came next. The first step was securing Maya's future, making sure no one could ever hurt her again. But that was just the beginning. The fight wasn't over. Jack walked down the path leading to the back of the cabin, his mind already working on the next phase of their plan. Donovan had been caught, but there were more shadows lurking in the dark corners of their lives. It was time to confront them head-on. With every step, Jack felt the weight of responsibility settle back onto his shoulders. He wasn't just fighting for Maya. He was fighting for everyone he loved, for the people who had become family over the years. And as he looked back at the cabin, he knew that no matter what, he would protect them all. The morning sun was now fully up, casting a golden light across the landscape. Jack had left the cabin, heading toward the nearby woods to meet with his brothers. His mind was still racing from everything that had happened in the past few days. Maya was safe for now, but the threat wasn't completely over. Donovan was behind bars, but Jack knew there were others out there who would stop at nothing to get to her. The fight wasn't finished, and Jack wasn't about to let his guard down. As he made his way through the woods, he felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders once again. Protecting Maya was now his top priority, but there was more to it than just keeping her safe. Jack had made a promise to her father, a promise that he would never break. The Thunderwolves were ready to stand by him, but there was a bigger battle ahead. As he reached the clearing where his brothers were waiting, he saw Storm standing near a fire, his expression grim. The others were nearby, talking quietly among themselves. Jack walked over, his boots crunching on the leaves beneath him. "How's everything?" Jack asked, looking at his brothers. Storm looked up, his eyes full of concern. "We've got eyes on Donovan. He's locked up, but his people won't stop. They're going to try to get him out, and they're not going to give up easily." Jack nodded. He had expected this. Donovan might be behind bars, but that didn't mean his influence was gone. "We need to make sure Maya stays hidden, at least for now," Jack said, his voice steady. "We can't afford to take any risks." One of the other bikers, a tall man named Bull, stepped forward. "We've already got a few places lined up. Safe houses, contacts we can trust. We'll keep her off the radar." Jack gave him a nod of approval. "Good. But we can't let our guard down. There are still people out there who are loyal to Donovan, and they'll come after her." "We know," Storm said, his voice low. "But we've got your back, Jack. We'll protect her, no matter what it takes." Jack smiled at his brothers. They had been through hell and back together, and this was no different. "I know you will. I just want to make sure she's safe. I made a promise to her father, and I'm going to keep it." There was a pause as the bikers exchanged looks, each of them understanding the weight of Jack's words. The bond between them was unspoken but strong. They were a family, and family meant everything. "We'll make sure she's safe, Jack," Bull said, his voice firm. "No one's getting to her." Jack nodded. "Thanks, guys. I appreciate it." He took a deep breath, steadying himself. "All right, let's move out. We've got work to do." The group of bikers mounted their motorcycles and started the engines, the rumble of the bikes filling the air. Jack could feel the adrenaline begin to build as they headed out, the mission ahead clear in his mind. They were going to make sure Maya stayed safe, no matter what it took. As they rode through the woods, Jack's thoughts turned back to Maya. He knew that she had a long road ahead of her, and there would be obstacles to face. But she wasn't alone anymore. She had the Thunder Wolves, and they would stand by her every step of the way. Jack's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, seeing a message from Elena. "Maya's still doing okay," the message read. "She's asking questions, but she's starting to trust us." Jack felt a sense of relief wash over him. At least for now, Maya was beginning to feel safe. But Jack knew it wouldn't be that easy. The shadows of the past always had a way of creeping back in, and he wasn't about to let his guard down. As the group of bikers rode into town, Jack's mind shifted to the next phase of their plan. Donovan may have been behind bars, but there were still people out there who would want to hurt Maya. He would make sure they didn't get the chance. "We're almost there," Jack said to his brothers as they approached their destination. "Stay sharp. We can't afford to let anything slip through the cracks." They nodded in unison, their eyes focused, their minds sharp. Jack's heart was pounding, the sense of urgency growing with each passing second. They pulled into a secluded area, a safe spot where they could regroup and plan their next move. Jack could feel the weight of the mission ahead, but he wasn't afraid. He had been in worse situations, faced darker times. But this time, he had something worth fighting for. He had a family that would stand by him, no matter what. "All right, let's go over the plan again," Jack said, as they dismounted from their bikes. "We need to keep Maya safe, and we need to make sure no one knows where she is." The bikers nodded, their focus intense. They were ready. "We've got the safe houses in place, but we need to make sure her stepfather's people can't track her down," Storm said. Jack looked around at his brothers, his heart swelling with pride. "We'll handle it. Together," he said firmly. "Now let's get to work." The day ahead would be long, and the stakes were high. But Jack was ready. He had made a promise to Maya's father, and he would do whatever it took to keep it. The fight wasn't over yet, but they were ready to face whatever came their way. Jack's phone buzzed again, a reminder of just how quickly things were moving. He looked down at the message. "We're in position," it read. "Ready when you are." Jack turned to his brothers, his eyes hardening with determination. "Let's do this." And with that, they moved out, ready to face the next chapter of the fight ahead. The day was drawing to a close as Jack and his brothers stood in the safe house, a sense of quiet urgency filling the room. They had taken all the necessary precautions. Maya was safe, hidden away from the world she had been forced to live in, but Jack knew this peace wouldn't last. Donovan's people would be looking for her, and it was only a matter of time before they started making moves. "We can't let our guard down," Jack said, his voice steady but firm. He was pacing, his mind racing with the next steps. "We've made sure she's hidden, but we need to know who's still loyal to him, who might try to find her." Storm, who had been listening intently, nodded. We've already got our eyes on the city. There's a few known associates of Donovan's still running around, but they haven't made any moves yet. We've got time. Jack stopped pacing and looked out the window. The sun had set, leaving the sky painted in shades of deep orange and purple. It was a beautiful sight, one that reminded him how much he had to protect. The peaceful world outside felt like a lie compared to the chaos he was trying to keep at bay. We need to move on this tonight, Jack said after a beat, his jaw tightening. Donovan's not in control anymore, but that doesn't mean he's not dangerous. He's going to have people looking for Maya. We have to act fast. Bull, one of the larger bikers in the group, spoke up from his place by the door. I've already made contact with a few old friends. We can get more eyes in place if needed. It won't be long before we know who's trying to make a move. Jack nodded. Good. Keep me updated. If we're going to make sure Maya stays safe, we need to be ahead of this, not playing catch-up. He turned to Elena, who had been quiet for most of the conversation. She had been a lifeline for them, helping get Maya to safety and keeping things together while Jack and his brothers worked out the strategy. What about you? How's Maya holding up? Elena glanced over at the couch where Maya was sitting. The young girl was silent, but her eyes were wide, taking in everything around her. She was sitting still, her hands folded in her lap, her body tense. It was clear that she was trying to hold herself together, but the cracks were starting to show. She's doing better than I expected, Elena said softly, her voice carrying the weight of the situation. But this is a lot for her. She's starting to trust us, but she's scared. And she's not even fully processing everything that's happened. Jack sighed, his heart heavy. I know, he said, walking over to where Maya sat. He crouched down in front of her, his voice gentle but firm. Maya, he said, waiting until she looked up at him. I need you to understand something. This isn't just about hiding. This is about you having a life again. A chance to be safe. A chance to heal. Maya looked at him for a long moment, as if weighing his words. Her lips parted as if she was about to speak, but she hesitated. Jack reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder, offering a reassuring touch. I know you're scared, he said softly, but you're not alone. I'm not going anywhere, and neither is anyone else here. You've got family now, and we're going to make sure you get to live your life the way you should have from the start. Maya's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't speak. She just nodded, the weight of her emotions too much to voice. Jack smiled, trying to ease some of the tension in the room. You're stronger than you know, he said, standing up and giving her space. But we need to keep moving. We've got work to do. Elena stood up from her chair, looking over at Jack. We've got a few leads on Donovan's associates, she said. We can start with them, but we need to be careful. The last thing we want is to lead them straight to Maya. Jack nodded. I agree. We have to keep her hidden, but we also have to be proactive. We need to eliminate any threats before they have a chance to even think about making a move. He turned to the rest of his brothers. All right, we're going to hit this hard and fast. We get in, we get out, and we make sure no one knows where Maya is. The bikers nodded in agreement, their faces determined. We've got your back, Jack, Storm said. You're not doing this alone. Jack smiled, grateful for the support of his brothers. I know, and I couldn't do it without you. The group quickly started to get ready. Their next move was crucial, and they couldn't afford to waste any time. Jack knew that once they made their move, everything would change. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but the battle was far from over. As the bikers prepared to head out, Jack took one last look at Maya, who was still sitting on the couch. Her face was tired, but her eyes were sharper now. She was starting to understand the enormity of what had happened, but Jack knew that she had come a long way. She wasn't the same terrified girl she had been just a few days ago. She was becoming stronger, more confident, and she was ready to take the next step. Jack walked over to her one last time before leaving the cabin. We're going to make sure you're safe, he said softly. And I'm going to be right here, every step of the way. Maya looked up at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. Thank you, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Jack smiled, his heart swelling with pride. You're welcome, he said, turning toward the door. Let's get to work. As Jack stepped out into the night with his brothers, the reality of what lay ahead settled over him. The fight wasn't over, but they were ready for whatever came next. With the Thunder Wolves by his side, and with Maya's future in his hands, Jack knew they would win. They would do whatever it took to make sure she was safe, no matter the cost. The day was drawing to a close as Jack and his brothers stood in the safe house, a sense of quiet urgency filling the room. They had taken all the necessary precautions. Maya was safe, hidden away from the world she had been forced to live in, but Jack knew this peace wouldn't last. Donovan's people would be looking for her, and it was only a matter of time before they started making moves. "We can't let our guard down," Jack said, his voice steady but firm. He was pacing, his mind racing with the next steps. "We've made sure she's hidden, but we need to know who's still loyal to him, who might try to find her." Storm, who had been listening intently, nodded. "We've already got our eyes on the city. There's a few known associates of Donovan's still running around, but they haven't made any moves yet. We've got time." Jack stopped pacing and looked out the window. The sun had set, leaving the sky painted in shades of deep orange and purple. It was a beautiful sight, one that reminded him how much he had to protect. The peaceful world outside felt like a lie compared to the chaos he was trying to keep at bay. "We need to move on this tonight," Jack said after a beat, his jaw tightening. "Donovan's not in control anymore, but that doesn't mean he's not dangerous. He's going to have people looking for Maya. We have to act fast." Bull, one of the larger bikers in the group, spoke up from his place by the door. "I've already made contact with a few old friends. We can get more eyes in place if needed. It won't be long before we know who's trying to make a move." Jack nodded. "Good. Keep me updated. If we're going to make sure Maya stays safe, we need to be ahead of this, not playing catch-up." He turned to Elena, who had been quiet for most of the conversation. She had been a lifeline for them, helping get Maya to safety and keeping things together while Jack and his brothers worked out the strategy. "What about you? How's Maya holding up?" Elena glanced over at the couch where Maya was sitting. The young girl was silent, but her eyes were wide, taking in everything around her. She was sitting still, her hands folded in her lap, her body tense. It was clear that she was trying to hold herself together, but the cracks were starting to show. "She's doing better than I expected," Elena said softly, her voice carrying the weight of the situation. "But this is a lot for her. She's starting to trust us, but she's scared, and she's not even fully processing everything that's happened." Jack sighed, his heart heavy. "I know," he said, walking over to where Maya sat. He crouched down in front of her, his voice gentle but firm. "Maya," he said, waiting until she looked up at him. "I need you to understand something. This isn't just about hiding. This is about you having a life again. A chance to be safe. A chance to heal." Maya looked at him for a long moment, as if weighing his words. Her lips parted as if she was about to speak, but she hesitated. Jack reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder, offering a reassuring touch. "I know you're scared," he said softly, "but you're not alone. I'm not going anywhere, and neither is anyone else here. You've got family now, and we're going to make sure you get to live your life the way you should have from the start." Maya's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't speak. She just nodded, the weight of her emotions too much to voice. Jack smiled, trying to ease some of the tension in the room. "You're stronger than you know," he said, standing up and giving her space. "But we need to keep moving. We've got work to do." Elena stood up from her chair, looking over at Jack. "We've got a few leads on Donovan's associates," she said. "We can start with them, but we need to be careful. The last thing we want is to lead them straight to Maya." Jack nodded. "I agree. We have to keep her hidden, but we also have to be proactive. We need to eliminate any threats before they have a chance to even think about making a move." He turned to the rest of his brothers. "All right, we're going to hit this hard and fast. We get in, we get out, and we make sure no one knows where Maya is." The bikers nodded in agreement, their faces determined. "We've got your back, Jack," Storm said. "You're not doing this alone." Jack smiled, grateful for the support of his brothers. "I know, and I couldn't do it without you." The group quickly started to get ready. Their next move was crucial, and they couldn't afford to waste any time. Jack knew that once they made their move, everything would change. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but the battle was far from over. As the bikers prepared to head out, Jack took one last look at Maya, who was still sitting on the couch. Her face was tired, but her eyes were sharper now. She was starting to understand the enormity of what had happened, but Jack knew that she had come a long way. She wasn't the same terrified girl she had been just a few days ago. She was becoming stronger, more confident, and she was ready to take the next step. Jack walked over to her one last time before leaving the cabin. "We're going to make sure you're safe," he said softly. And I'm going to be right here, every step of the way. Maya looked up at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. Thank you, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Jack smiled, his heart swelling with pride. You're welcome, he said, turning toward the door. Let's get to work. As Jack stepped out into the night with his brothers, the reality of what lay ahead settled over him. The fight wasn't over, but they were ready for whatever came next. With the Thunder Wolves by his side, and with Maya's future in his hands, Jack knew they would win. They would do whatever it took to make sure she was safe, no matter the cost. The air felt different as Jack and his brothers rolled into the heart of the small town. The sun was setting, casting long shadows on the streets, but there was a palpable sense of change in the air. Jack could feel it in his bones. This was the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Maya was no longer running. She was safe, and with the Thunder Wolves by her side, she had a chance to finally heal. They had done what they came here to do. Donovan was behind bars, and his associates had scattered. The threat was gone, at least for now. But Jack knew it was only temporary. People like Donovan didn't stay quiet for long. We've got her safe, Storm said, his voice steady but filled with relief. The threat's been neutralized. Jack nodded, but his mind was already racing. There was still so much more to be done. Maya needed more than just protection. She needed to rebuild her life. She needed a future that wasn't defined by fear. We've done the hard part, Jack said, his gaze focused on the road ahead. Now, we make sure she's never alone again. As they parked the bikes outside the cabin, Jack glanced at Maya. She had come a long way since the night they had first rescued her. She was no longer the scared little girl trapped in a nightmare. She was starting to believe in the possibility of a different life. A life where she could be free. Jack walked over to where she was standing, looking at the cabin, her expression unreadable. He could see the weight of everything she had been through still lingering in her eyes. But there was something else there too. A spark of hope. How do you feel? Jack asked, his voice gentle. Maya hesitated for a moment, then smiled. It wasn't a huge smile, but it was a smile nonetheless. Better, she said, her voice still quiet but steadier than before. I'm not scared anymore. Jack felt a weight lift from his chest. This was the moment he had been fighting for. The moment he knew, deep down, that everything would be okay. Maya was safe. The nightmare was over. But Jack also knew that healing wasn't instant. It would take time, and there would be hard days ahead. You've got a long road ahead of you, Jack said, crouching down to her level. But you don't have to walk it alone. We're family now, and we'll help you every step of the way. Maya looked up at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. Thank you, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Jack smiled and ruffled her hair gently. No need to thank me. We take care of our own. The sound of motorcycles filled the air as the rest of the Thunder Wolves rolled into the clearing. They had finished the job, but there was still work to be done. Jack had promised Maya's father that he would protect her, and he wasn't going to break that promise. It's time, Jack said, his voice filled with determination. Let's finish what we started. They gathered around the fire pit in the center of the cabin, their faces illuminated by the flickering light. Each member of the Thunder Wolves stood tall, their loyalty unwavering. They had fought together, bled together, and now, they would make sure Maya had the future she deserved. We did good, brothers, Storm said, his voice rough but filled with pride. We got her out, and we'll make sure she stays safe. She's one of us now. Jack nodded, his gaze shifting to the rest of the group. We've got more work to do, but for now, let's take a moment. Let's enjoy the peace we've fought for. The night settled around them, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Jack allowed himself to relax. He had kept his promise to Maya's father. She was safe, and she had a family that would protect her, no matter what. The fight wasn't over. There were still challenges ahead, but Jack knew they were ready. The Thunder Wolves were more than just a group of bikers. They were a family, bound by loyalty, and together, they could face anything that came their way. As the fire crackled and the night grew darker, Jack stood up and looked around at the people who had become his family. They had come through this together, and now, they would help Maya rebuild her life. She would grow stronger, and with their support, she would find her place in the world again. Jack knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he also knew one thing for certain. They would face it together. With the Thunder Wolves by her side, Maya had a future. And that was all that mattered. We've got you, Maya, Jack said quietly, looking over at her as she stood with her head held high. And we always will. The night stretched on, the stars above them a reminder that despite everything, there was still hope. There was always hope. And as long as they had each other, they would always fight for that hope. Maya wasn't alone anymore. And neither was Jack.